Trust can blind you to the sharpest betrayals. When faith becomes a mask for deception, the fallout shatters everything you've built. This is Marcus's raw, emotional journey through love, faith, and a devastating truth. My name's Marcus, I'm 35, and I live in a small town just outside Raleigh, North Carolina. I'm an electrician for a construction company, the guy who's up at 5 a.m., wiring houses and office buildings, making sure the lights stay on. My hands are rough from stripping cables and climbing ladders, but I take pride in my work. I've been married to Lena for 8 years, and if you'd told me a few years ago I'd be pouring my heart out like this, I'd have laughed. But here I am, because what happened? It's eating me alive, and I need to get it off my chest. I didn't have an easy start. My dad was a drunk who'd rather swing a fist than a hammer, and my mom worked herself to the bone at a diner to keep us afloat. I swore I'd be different, that I'd build a life with meaning, something solid. Faith gave me that foundation. I found Grace Covenant Church when I was 22, desperate to pull myself out of my own drinking problem. That place was a lifeline. The hymns, the community, the way it made me feel like I wasn't just my mistakes, it's also where I met Lena. She had this warmth, this fierce kindness, and a laugh that could light up the darkest parts of me. We got married young, dreaming of a home, kids, a life grounded in faith. But life doesn't always play nice. My drinking got worse before it got better. For years ago, I hit bottom, passed out in my truck after a bender. No clue how I got there. Lena stayed through it, but it took a toll. She started throwing herself into our church, Grace Covenant. During my recovery, she'd volunteer for everything: food drives, youth groups, you name it. I was grateful, honestly. I was working long hours, trying to stay sober, and she needed something to hold on to. That's when Pastor David showed up. David was new, maybe 40, with the steady voice that made you feel like he saw your soul. Everyone loved him. His sermons felt like they were meant just for you. Lena started working closely with him on church projects. They'd plan charity events, organize prayer groups, and I was proud of her dedication. But then things started feeling off. She'd stay late for what she called prayer sessions with David. Her phone would light up at 10 p.m., and she'd smile, saying it was just church business. I'd ask questions, and she'd get defensive, her eyes flashing with hurt. "Marcus, this is God's work. Why can't you trust me?" she'd say. I felt like a jerk for even bringing it up. This was our pastor, the guy who'd sat with me during detox, praying while I shook. The guy who'd married us, preaching about love and commitment. Still, my gut wouldn't shut up. One night, I tried talking to her about it, careful not to sound like I was accusing her. "Lena, you're with David a lot. It's weird, okay?" She shut me down hard. "You're letting your past make you paranoid." "I'm serving God, Marcus. Don't twist that into something ugly." I backed off, hating myself for doubting her. I didn't want to be the jealous husband, the guy who couldn't handle his wife's faith. I was fighting so hard to stay sober, to be the man I promised I'd be, but something was gnawing at me. This quiet dread I couldn't shake. Looking back, I wish I'd listened to it, because while I was trying to rebuild myself, something else was slipping into my life, something that would break me worse than any bottle ever could. The weeks after that fight with Lena were like walking on a tightrope. I was trying to keep my head down, focus on work, and stay sober, but this nagging feeling in my chest wouldn't let up. I'd be up on a ladder at a construction site, running wires through a half-built house, and my mind would drift to her late-night prayer sessions with David. I'd picture them sitting close in the church office, heads bowed, her hand maybe brushing his. I'd shake it off, tell myself I was being paranoid. But it was like trying to swat away a mosquito that kept coming back. Work was my escape. Being an electrician keeps you busy, crawling through attics, troubleshooting circuits, double-checking blueprints. I'd lose myself in the rhythm of it, the satisfaction of a job done right. But even there, I couldn't fully shut it out. My buddy Jake, who's a carpenter on the same crew, noticed I was off. One day, over lunch, he tossed me a soda and said, "Man, you look like you're carrying the whole site on your shoulders. What's up?" I shrugged, not wanting to sound like some insecure husband. "Just stress." I mumbled. He didn't push, but his look said he knew it was more than that. At home, things were worse. Lena was pulling away, and it wasn't just my imagination. She'd come back from church glowing, talking about how David's sermons were life-changing, or how their latest charity drive was such a blessing. But when I'd try to talk about us, our plans, our future, she'd get quiet, like I was interrupting something more important. I'd catch her texting late at night, her face lit up by the phone screen, and she'd say it was just the church group chat. I wanted to believe her, but every time I saw David's name in her stories, it was like a punch to the gut. I started going to church less. It used to be my anchor, the place where I felt like I could breathe, but now it felt like walking into a trap. David would shake my hand after service, his grip firm, his smile warm, and I'd wonder if he was laughing at me inside. "Good to see you, Marcus," he'd say, and I'd nod, forcing a smile, feeling like a fraud. I hated how my mind twisted everything. His kindness, Lena's faith, into something ugly. Was I the problem? Was my past, my drinking, my rough edges making me see things that weren't there? One night, I couldn't take it anymore. Lena was at another planning meeting at church, and I was home alone, pacing the living room. I poured myself a glass of water, my hands shaking, and stared at the fridge where we kept a photo from our wedding day. Lena's smile in that picture, it used to make me feel like I could do anything. Now it just made me feel like a fool. I grabbed my keys and drove to the church, not even sure what I was looking for. The parking lot was half empty, and I saw Lena's car parked near David's. I sat there, engine off, heart pounding, telling myself to go home, but I couldn't move. That's when I saw them through the church window. They were in the office, standing close, laughing about something. It wasn't anything obvious, no touching, no kissing, but it was the way she looked at him, like he was the sun, and I was just nothing. I drove home, my chest tight, my knuckles white on the wheel. I didn't sleep that night. I kept replaying it, wondering if I was losing my mind or if my marriage was slipping through my fingers. I wanted to confront her, to scream, to demand answers, but I was terrified of what she'd say. What if I was wrong? What if I was right? That night at the church changed something in me. I didn't confront Lena when she got home, even though every fiber of my body wanted to. She slipped into bed around 11 p.m., smelling like her lavender shampoo, muttering something about how productive the meeting was. I lay there, eyes fixed on the ceiling, my heart hammering so loud I was sure she'd hear it. I wanted to ask what she was laughing about with David, why she looked at him like he hung the moon, but I didn't. I just nodded when she said goodnight, feeling like a coward for staying silent. The next few days were a blur. At work, I was a mess, fumbling wires, misreading blueprints. My boss, Carl, a gruff guy who's seen me at my worst, pulled me aside one afternoon. "Marcus, you're wiring like you're half asleep. Get it together or take a day." I apologized, blamed it on lack of sleep, but it wasn't just that. It was the weight of doubt, pressing down harder every day. I'd be stripping insulation off a cable, and my mind would replay that moment in the church window, Lena's smile, David's easy laugh. It was like a splinter I couldn't dig out. I tried talking to Lena, but it was like shouting into a void. One evening, I cooked dinner, her favorite, chicken Alfredo, hoping it'd spark something normal between us. She was distracted, picking at her food, checking her phone every few minutes. I asked about her day, and she gave me vague answers about church stuff. "David's planning a big outreach program," she said, her eyes lighting up. "It's going to help so many people." I gripped my fork tighter, forcing a smile. "Sounds great," I said, but inside, I was screaming. Why was it always David? Why did she talk about him like he was the answer to everything? I started noticing little things I'd ignored before. She'd changed her phone's lock code. I found out when I tried to check the time while hers was charging. She'd leave the room to take calls, her voice low, too quiet for me to hear. Once, I saw a text notification pop up from Dee with a heart emoji. She snatched the phone before I could read more, laughing it off as a church friend. I wanted to believe her, but it felt like I was trying to hold water in my hands. Everything was slipping away. My faith was crumbling, too. I'd stopped going to Grace Covenant altogether. The thought of sitting in those pews, listening to David preach about honesty and love, made my stomach turn. I'd drive past the church on my way to work, see his name on the signboard, and feel this mix of rage and shame. I'd spent years building my life around that place, thinking it'd make me a better man. Now it felt like a lie. I'd pray at night, alone in the garage, asking God why this was happening. Was I being tested? Punished? I didn't hear any answers, just the hum of the fluorescent lights above me. Jake, my buddy from work, finally got me to open up a little. We were grabbing beers after a long shift. Mine was a ginger ale, since I don't touch the real stuff anymore. You look like hell, man, he said, blunt as ever. I told him about Lena's late nights. David's name coming up too often. Without spilling everything, he leaned back, scratching his beard. Trust your gut, Marcus. You're not crazy for noticing what's in front of you. His words stuck with me, but they didn't make it easier. I didn't want to be right. I wanted my wife back, my life back. By then, I was barely sleeping. I'd lie awake, listening to Lena's soft breathing, wondering if she dreamed about him. I started checking her car's mileage, her purse for receipts, anything to prove I wasn't losing it. I hated who I was becoming. This suspicious guy I didn't recognize. But the truth was, I was terrified. Terrified that the woman I loved, the life I'd fought for, was already gone. I was unraveling, and I knew it. The suspicion about Lena and David was like a live wire in my hands, dangerous, impossible to let go. I'd catch myself at work, staring at a junction box, my hands frozen mid-task, picturing them together. As an electrician, you can't afford to zone out, miss a ground wire, and you could burn a whole site down, but my focus was shot. One day, I nearly shocked myself splicing a live circuit, my mind on Lena's locked phone, that heart emoji from D. My coworker Dave yanked me back, swearing, "Marcus, you trying to fry yourself?" I laughed it off, but inside, I was scared, not of the voltage, but of what I might do if I kept spiraling. I was fighting to keep my sobriety intact, too. The urge to drink hadn't been this bad since detox. I'd drive home, past the liquor store on Route 64, and my mouth would go dry. I'd grip the steering wheel, praying for strength, my knuckles pale. I'd started going to more AA meetings, sitting in the back of the community center, listening to stories of relapse and redemption. I didn't help much. My problem wasn't just the bottle. It was the hole in my chest where trust used to be. I'd share vague bits with the group, saying my marriage was rocky, but I never mentioned David. I didn't want to say his name, like it'd make it all too real. Home was a minefield. Lena was pulling away further. Her eyes always somewhere else. She'd talk about church, about with David's incredible vision for the outreach program, and I'd feel like I was an outsider in my own life. I tried bridging that gap the distance. One night, I suggested we do a movie night, like we used to when we were dating popcorn, her favorite rom-coms. She agreed, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. Halfway through, she was watching TV when she got a text and stepped outside. I saw her pacing the porch, phone to her ear, voice hushed. When she came back inside, I asked who it was, and she said, "Just a friend from church." I wanted her to push, to ask why church friends needed her at 10 p.m., but I froze. My words stuck in my throat. I started digging, hating myself for it. I'd check Lena's car mileage when she was asleep, looking for trips she couldn't explain. I'd glance at her purse when she was in the shower, searching for receipts, notes, anything. Nothing turned up. But that didn't ease the knot in my stomach. It made it worse, like I was chasing a ghost. I'd lie awake, her breathing soft beside me, and wonder if I was the problem. Was I too broken? Too jealous? My dad's voice echoed in my head, calling me worthless, and I'd fight it, but it was getting harder. I finally tried confronting her. One Saturday morning, she was making coffee, humming some and I just blurted it out, "Lena, what's going on with you and David? You're always with him." She froze, her hand on the mug, then turned, her face hard. "Marcus, you're doing it again. You're twisting my faith into something dirty. I'm serving God, and you're making me feel like a criminal." Her voice cracked, and I felt like garbage. "I'm not accusing you," I said, softer. "It's just, you're gone all the time. I miss you." She softened a little, but her eyes were guarded. "I'm here, Marcus, but I need you to trust me." I nodded, but the words felt hollow. That night, I went to the garage, my safe haven. Tools lined the walls, my workbench covered in half-finished projects. I sat there, holding a sobriety chip from my 2-year mark, turning it over in my fingers. I prayed, but it felt like shouting into a storm. I needed proof, something to stop the madness in my head, but part of me was terrified to find it, because if I was right, everything I'd fought for, everything I'd built, was already gone. I was living in a fog, and it was getting thicker. Every day felt like I was wiring a circuit blindfolded. One wrong move, and everything could spark and burn. Work was the only place I could pretend to be normal, but even that was slipping. I'd be up on a scaffold, running conduit through a new office building, and my hands would shake, not from the height, but from the weight of what I couldn't say out loud. My crew noticed. Jake, my carpenter buddy, kept eyeing me like I was a loose nail. He needed to hammer down. You gotta talk to someone. Man, he said one day, tossing me a water bottle during a break. I just shrugged, muttering about stress, but I knew he wasn't buying it. At home, Lena was a stranger wearing my wife's face. She'd smile, make small talk about her day, but it was like she was reading from a script. Her phone was glued to her hand, and she'd angle it away when I walked by. I'd catch her staring out the kitchen window, lost in thought, and wonder if she was thinking about David. I hated how my mind went there every time, but I couldn't stop it. It was like a bad habit, picking at a scab until it bled. I'd try to act normal, fix her coffee the way she liked it, cream and one sugar, or ask about her mom's health. But the warmth we used to have was gone, replaced by this polite distance that made my skin crawl. My sobriety was hanging by a thread. I'd drive home from work, my truck rattling over the back roads, and past that liquor store with its neon sign glowing like a siren's call. I'd white-knuckle the wheel, reciting the serenity prayer under my breath. But it felt like empty words. AA meetings helped a little, but I was too ashamed to share the whole truth. I'd talk about marriage trouble and trust issues, but I couldn't bring myself to say I was scared my wife was cheating with our pastor. It sounded too pathetic, too much like a bad movie, but the fear was real, and it was eating me alive. I kept digging for proof, even though it made me feel like a creep. I'd wait until Lena was asleep, then check her coat pockets, her glove box, anything. One night, I found a folded note in her purse, tucked inside a side pocket. My heart stopped as I opened it. Expecting some damning love letter, it was just a grocery list: milk, eggs, bread, but my hands were still shaking when I put it back. I hated who I'd become, this paranoid guy sneaking around his own house, but I didn't know how to stop. I needed something solid, something to prove I wasn't crazy, or to prove I was, so I could move on. Then came the church picnic. Lena insisted I go, saying it'd be good for us to reconnect with the community. I didn't want to, but I went, hoping maybe it'd fix something. The park was packed with families, kids running around, tables piled with casseroles and lemonade. David was there, of course, holding court like some holy rock star. I watched him work the crowd, shaking hands, hugging old ladies, and then he spotted Lena. They didn't touch, but the way he smiled at her, the way she lit up, it was like a knife twisting in my ribs. I stood there, holding a paper plate of potato salad, feeling like the ground was swallowing me. Later, I overheard something that made my blood run cold. I was near the pavilion, grabbing a soda, when I heard David's voice from behind a tree, low and urgent. He was talking to another pastor, someone I didn't know. It's complicated, he said. She's special to me, but it's under control. I froze, my ears straining. The other guy murmured something, and David laughed, a nervous sound. No, Marcus doesn't suspect a thing. My name in his mouth felt like a slap. I walked away, my legs numb, my mind screaming. I didn't know what she meant, but I knew it wasn't good. That night, I sat in my truck, staring at our house, wondering how much more I could take before I broke. Hearing my name in David's mouth at that picnic broke something in me. It was like a switch flipped, and all the doubts I'd been wrestling with turned into this ugly certainty. I drove home that day in a daze, my truck's engine humming while my mind screamed. Lena was in the passenger seat, chatting about the kids' games at the picnic, oblivious to the storm inside me. I nodded along, my jaw tight, but all I could hear was David's voice. Marcus doesn't suspect a thing. It echoed like a taunt, like I was some clueless fool they were playing. I wanted to pull over, demand answers, but I just kept driving, my hands choking the wheel. Work became my only lifeline, but even that was fraying. As an electrician, you're supposed to stay sharp, misjudge a wire, and you're toast. But I was a ghost on the job site, running cables through walls like a robot. One morning, I botched a panel installation, crossing wires that could have caused a fire. Jake caught it before the inspector did, pulling me aside. Marcus, you're scaring me, man. What's going on? His voice was steady, but his eyes were worried. I mumbled something about family stuff. But he didn't let it go. "You're not drinking again, are you?" he asked. I shook my head. But the truth was, I was closer than I'd been in years. Every night, I'd pass that liquor store, its neon sign winking at me, and I'd have to talk myself out of stopping. Home was a battlefield I didn't know how to fight in. Lena was pulling further away, her warmth replaced by this cool politeness that made me feel like a stranger. She'd spend hours at church, coming back with stories about David's inspiring plans for the community. I'd sit there, eating dinner alone, her plate untouched, and feel this ache in my chest. I missed her. The real her. The woman who'd laugh at my dumb jokes, who'd curl up next to me on the couch. Now, she'd slip into bed late, her back to me, and I'd lie awake, wondering if she was dreaming of him. I stopped praying. That was the hardest part. Faith had been my anchor, the thing that got me through detox, through my dad's voice in my head calling me worthless. But now, God felt distant, like he'd turned his back on me. I'd sit in my garage, surrounded by tools and half-finished shelves, and try to pray. But the words wouldn't come. I'd hold my sobriety chip, the one from my 3-year mark, and wonder if I'd been a fool to believe in redemption. Was this my punishment for my past? For not being good enough? I kept replaying David's words, trying to convince myself I'd misheard. Maybe she wasn't Lena. Maybe I was jumping to conclusions, but then I'd remember her locked phone, the heart emoji, the way she'd light up when she talked about him. I started watching her closer, hating myself for it. I'd note the time she left for church, the excuses she gave. One night, she said she was meeting the outreach team, but I drove by the church on a whim. Her car wasn't there. I sat in the parking lot, my heart pounding, telling myself it didn't mean anything. Maybe she was at a coffee shop, planning with the group, but deep down, I knew better. I finally snapped one evening. Lena came home late, her hair damp like she'd showered somewhere else. I was in the living room, the TV on but ignored, and I couldn't hold it in anymore. "Where were you?" I asked, my voice sharper than I meant. She froze, then sighed, like I was exhausting her. "At church, Marcus, you know that." I stood up, my hands shaking. "Your car wasn't there. I checked." Her eyes widened, then narrowed. "You're spying on me now? That's what we're doing." She sounded hurt, but it felt rehearsed. I wanted to scream about David, about the picnic, but I choked on the words. Instead, I said, "I just want the truth, Lena." She stared at me, her face unreadable, then walked away. I stood there, alone, feeling like the ground was crumbling under me. That fight with Lena left me hollowed out, like someone had ripped the wiring from my soul. I stood in the living room, the TV flickering in the dark, her footsteps fading down the hall, her silence after I called her out about her car not being at church. Felt like a confession, even if she didn't say the words. I wanted her to turn around, to explain, to prove me wrong, but she just shut the bedroom door. I sank onto the couch, my head in my hands, and stayed there until the sun came up. My mind racing but getting nowhere. Work was a nightmare. I was running on fumes, my eyes burning from lack of sleep. As an electrician, you've got to be precise, measure twice, cut once, check every connection. But I was making mistakes left and right. I miswired a breaker panel on a new condo project, and Carl, my boss, chewed me out in front of the crew. "Marcus, you're better than this. Pull it together or you're off the site." His voice wasn't cruel, just disappointed, and that stung worse. Jake cornered me later, his tool belt clinking as he leaned against a stud wall. "Talk to me, man. This ain't you." I wanted to tell him everything about Lena, David, the picnic, but the words felt too heavy, like they'd choke me if I let them out. "I'm fine." I lied, and he just shook his head, walking away. I couldn't face Lena at home, so I started staying out later, driving aimlessly after work. I'd pass the church, its steeple lit up against the night sky, and feel this mix of anger and grief. Grace Covenant used to be my refuge, the place where I rebuilt myself after hitting rock bottom. Now it was a wound I couldn't stop picking. I'd think about David's voice at the picnic, saying I didn't suspect a thing, and my stomach would twist. I'd think about Lena's face, how it used to light up for me. And now it was all for him. I'd park by the river, watching the water move, and try to pray, but it was like God had gone silent. My sobriety chip, the one I carried everywhere, felt like a lie in my pocket. I started avoiding Lena altogether. I'd leave for work before she woke up, come home after she was asleep. She didn't seem to care she was gone just as much, always with some church excuse. One night, I found a coffee shop receipt in her jacket pocket. Dated for a time she said she was at a prayer meeting. It was from a place downtown, nowhere near the church. I sat at the kitchen table, the receipt crumpled in my fist, and felt like I was drowning. I wanted to confront her again, but what was the point? She just turned it around, make me feel like I was the one breaking us. Then came the moment that pushed me over the edge. I was at an AA meeting, sitting in the back, barely listening as people shared their stories. My phone buzzed, a text from Jake, who'd been checking in more lately. He'd sent a photo from the cruise group chat. A candid shot from a job site barbecue I'd skipped. In the background, clear as day, was Lena. She was laughing, her hand on David's arm, his head tilted toward her like they were sharing a secret. Jake's text read, "Thought you should. See this." My hand shook so bad I nearly dropped the phone. I left the meeting, got in my truck, and drove straight to the church. It was late, the lot empty except for David's car. I didn't know what I was going to do, yell, fight, beg for the truth. But I couldn't keep swallowing this poison. I sat there, staring at the church's stained glass windows, glowing faintly in the dark. My whole life, my marriage, my faith, my sobriety felt like it was hanging by a thread. I didn't know if I was strong enough to face what came next. But I knew I couldn't run from it anymore. Something had to give. Sitting in that church parking lot, staring at David's car, I felt like I was at the edge of a cliff. My truck's engine ticked as it cooled, the dashboard clock glowing 10:47 p.m. That photo Jake sent. Lena's hand on David's arm, their shared laughter, burned in my mind. I'd spent months dodging the truth, but it was staring me down now, and I couldn't look away. My hands shook as I gripped my sobriety chip, the 3-year one, its edges worn from all the times I'd rubbed it like a lifeline. I didn't know what I'd say to David, but I needed answers, even if they broke me. I got out, my boots crunching on the gravel, and walked toward the church. The side door was unlocked, lights spilling from the office down the hall. My heart pounded, each step heavier than the last. I heard voices, David's, low and smooth, and then Lena's, soft, almost a whisper. I froze outside the door, my breath shallow, catching fragments of their words. "We can't keep doing this," Lena said, her voice cracking. "It's wrong." David murmured something I couldn't hear. Then, clearer, "It's not wrong if it's love." My stomach lurched. I pushed the door open, not caring anymore. They jumped apart, Lena's face going pale, David's eyes wide before he masked it with that pastor's calm. "Marcus," he started, but I cut him off. "Don't. Just don't." My voice was shaking, but it didn't break. Lena stepped forward, her hands out like she could stop me from falling apart. "Marcus, it's not what you think," she said, but her eyes were guilty, and I saw it all. The late nights, the locked phone, the heart emoji. 2 years, I said, my voice low, remembering what I'd overheard at the picnic. "You've been lying to me for 2 years." She flinched, and that was all the confirmation I needed. David tried to speak, something about spiritual connection and God's plan, but I laughed, a bitter sound that echoed in the room. "You used my faith against me," I said, "both of you." Lena was crying now, saying she was sorry, that it started as comfort during my drinking days, but I couldn't hear it. It was like my heart had short-circuited, all the wires fried. I turned and walked out, ignoring her calling my name. I drove home, packed a bag, and left. I couldn't stay in that house, surrounded by her lies. The next few days were a blur. I crashed at Jake's place, sleeping on his couch, barely eating. Work was out of the question. I called in sick, something I'd never done. My crew probably thought I'd relapsed, and I didn't care. I'd wake up shaking, reliving Lena's voice, David's smug excuses, hating myself for trusting them. I went to an AA meeting, but I couldn't share. How do you tell a room full of strangers your wife and your pastor betrayed you? I'd sit in Jake's garage, staring at my tools, wondering if I'd ever feel whole again. My faith was gone. I couldn't even look at my Bible, the one I'd marked up during detox. Its pages full of hope I didn't feel anymore. I'd trusted God, trusted Lena, trusted David. And it all burned me. I questioned everything. My worth, my sobriety, my life. Was I too broken to deserve loyalty? But in those dark moments, something clicked. Faith can be a weapon when it's twisted. Blind trust isn't holy. It's dangerous. I'd let my need to be a better man blind me to the truth, and it cost me everything. I didn't know what came next. I wasn't ready to forgive or even to move on, but I knew I had to start rebuilding, piece by piece, like wiring a house from scratch. I'd survived worse. My dad's fists, the bottle's pull. I could survive this. I had to, because if I didn't, their betrayal would win, and I wasn't about to let that happen.